Hello, this video is for Kim, and it is going to be demonstrating Tunisian lace. I'm going to be using a straight needle. Let me get this behind here so you can focus better. Alright, so I'm going to be using a straight needle. It is a Tunisian needle. There is other options, and from what I'm seeing in the picture, you're using a system similar, may not be interchangeable, but where you have a hook and you have a series of cords or cables with the back connectors or a backstop to prevent the stitches from sliding off. Both methods will work just fine, but for this short video I'm going to use the straight needle. I'm not sure if you are using a variegated yarn or if there is color changes that are happening at either end. So from what I'm seeing, it is multiples of 3. I'm going to chain at least 12. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And there are two basic things to remember for Tunisian. There is a forward row, and that's where you pick up your stitches, and a return row, and that is where you end up working your stitches as needed for the pattern. So for the pickup row, you are going to insert your hook, pick up your stitch, go to the next one, insert your hook, and pick up your stitch. And you're going to continue this, and it's very similar to a decrease where you pick up more than one stitch, but instead of decreasing them together, you just continue all the way to the end. And you're going to want to pick up one stitch per chained section. And the very last one. Okay, so I have a stitch per chain. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The return row. For the simple stitch, you want to pull through 1, yarn over, and pull through 2. And then you end up yarning over. Oops, let me get focus again. You end up yarning over and pulling through 2 for the remainder of the row. And what this does is essentially you are chaining back, but you are slipping off every stitch individually. Every picked up stitch is in its own little segment, and that produces the grid work for the simple stitch. But we are interested in the lace stitch. So this is your first row, but it's not complete until you do the forward pass of your next row. And what that does is it turns your return row sideways, and it presses the top of those chain stitches through the little grids, and it essentially turns it from being flat to on its side, and that can produce a curl. So we will want to slip between the front and the back leg and pick up our stitch, slip between the front and the back leg and pick up our stitch. And this is just a simple forward pass, and this is going to prepare us for the lace that is demonstrated in that photo or shared in that photo. And I'm going to kind of peek over the camera here. Okay, so you're going to pick up until you get to the end, and you need to make sure that you actually, separate the front and the back leg and pick up. Okay, I'm back again. I had to pause for a moment. So the lace stitch happens on the return row, and I'm going to want to maintain this edge stitch, so this selvage edge. So I'm going to yarn over and go through one loop as standard, and I'm going to separate these into clusters of 3. 1, 2, 3, these 3 stitches, and because it's a reduction, it's going to produce one spot for us to come back into. So what I want to do to prevent it from going from straight up and pinching in, as what would happen with a decrease, I want to provide enough chain for it to recover on the next round. So I'm going to, I did the yarn over and went through 1, and that is going to start my lace section. So I'm going to go yarn over and chain. That's 1, 2, and because I'm doing sets of 3, I'm going to do the lace section here. 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3. And then that will maintain my stitch count later. So 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 2, and 3. And since I don't have 3 here, I'm going to yarn over and treat it like a normal simple stitch. Alright, so now I have segments where I have clusters and where I don't have clusters, but essentially my stitch count should be the same. So I'm going to do the pickup for the next row as 1, and now I'm come to the cluster, and you have a choice. You can either only pick up from the middle leg, or you can slide through all 3. Oops, I think I split my stitch. I did. Okay, so you can pick up through all 3 and treat it as a single stitch, which I'm going to do as soon as it... Oh, I split the stitch again. It's a very splitty yarn. Alright. There we go. 1, 2, and 3. And then for these other ones, because it was a reduction, that's 1 stitch. But if I don't pick up the individual chains that I did beforehand, I will have a severe lack of stitches. So there's 1, and there's 2, and that should replace, 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, and 3. So again, slide between all the legs to keep my cluster together, unless you're looking for a different look, and by all means, try other things. And then I want to pick up a stitch. Let's see here. That's the tie off. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And that takes care of that one and the start of this cluster here. So I got 2 more stitches to pick up before I reach the end stitch. 1, 2, and then the selvage stitch. Okay. So it kind of wants to cluster already. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. So on the next return row, depending on the pattern and what it calls for, you can either do a simple return row, which will result in this first row, my foundation row here, and then you can do the next row with your lace stitches. But from what I'm seeing in the photo, it looks like every return row was the lace clustering, but it kind of looks offset. And by that I mean these three looked like they were clustered together, and then these three look like they would cluster together, and then that would result in this staggered spacing where the clusters are in between each other. And for that I would need to use my selvage edge right here, 1, 2, as part of the cluster. And because I couldn't, use, the space between the selvage edge and the first cluster like I did in this row and give myself my 2 extra stitches, the first stitch is going to be the decrease, and the next 2 stitches are going to be essentially my replacements. So there's my replacements, that's 3. And then 1 for my cluster, 2, and 3. One, 2, 3. That's the first stitch. 2 and 3. And because I do have enough to do another cluster, I'm going to go ahead and do that one as a cluster. But it's going to be a little bit trickier because there's no space. 2, 3. So if I were to do that, then I would have kind of a gap here. So my suggestion would be, groupings of 3 plus enough for a selvage. I'll go ahead and take that out. And the nice thing about Tunisian is that it is easy to rip back. And all you gotta do is slip your needle back through your stitches like so, and then like crochet, you just pop out the required amount of stitches. And then you can pick up as needed. So that was my 3, yarn over, 1, 2, 3. So this row will only have 2. I'm not sure how your shawl or whatever piece that picture came from, I'm not sure how that's all situated, but as you can see, this produced kind of an offset, staggered I really want to say there may have been a purl row in between these lace sections, just because of the way the picture looked. And like I said, you may want to experiment, but from what I'm seeing here, it looks like you see the clustering of this right here. This is done in blue, and I don't know how well that's going to show up in my camera here, but it's done in blue, and those are the 3 that are put together. They're clustered together. So the blue row happened on the forward pass, and that's where they picked up every single loop. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm assuming it continues on just based on the rest of the rows here. The purple row was the return row, and you can see right here where it's done in 1 stitch as I showed before, and then here's 2 and 3, and 1, 2, and 3. You see the 2 chains that they did to accommodate that. But what I'm not sure of is right here. I can't really tell about the forward pass because it looks like it was picked up as a purl stitch. And if it was picked up as a purl stitch, then that means that it was done with the yarn in front. And that's perfectly valid. It will work. So your forward pass was picked up, and I'm guessing it was done right here, because I can see the 3 clustering. So right here and right here, it's done in purple. So I'm guessing the purple was done as a back, and then picked up on the forward, and then it was changed to the green, which was used to then section these off into the lace. And then I'm seeing here, on this part here, here's the green, and it's being used to create the color loops. And then I'm guessing it was changed to purple, which was used on the back, the return pass to cluster the greens together. And that was done with the reduction that's demonstrated. So there's your 2 spaces. So the purple was used to go forward, and that's right here, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. So they picked up in every single one of the chain stitches, and they may have just done the chain pickups in the back hump, and that would turn the stitch, that would turn the orientation of the stitch, so it wasn't pressing the top of the chain stitch through the gap, but forcing it to be tilted. And if that's the case, then that might result in this kind of puffy ridge, because I'm really not seeing the evidence of a purl stitch here. The purl stitches would have the yarn in front, and it's not. It's actually in the back. So, but I'm seeing that the purple was used to cluster here, so that was used on the forward pass. And then I'm seeing yellow on the return pass, which is being used to pinch the purples together into that lace segment. But I'm seeing blue on the forward pass, so that's what gives me the idea that it may be a variegated yarn. And blue was being used on the forward pass, which gives it here, here, and here, where it's picked up through the yellow. And then on the return pass, it's back again to purple, which segments the blue into